Next, we're going to move on to stories from very accomplished women. Ella Lazarte from the is a water and sanitation specialist at the Water and Sanitation Program at the World Bank, and we have asked her to speak a little bit about her personal journey through water a little bit, and then some successful public-private partnerships that she's been involved in, and opportunities for the business community that she sees from her seat, her perspective at the World Bank. Thank you very
much. Good afternoon, everybody. What a tough act to follow, let me just say. Normally I do the same. I write my own, I usually just speak freely. But they say pregnancy actually affects people's memory. So I'm just saying I want to make sure my 5 minutes is worth my time and your time. So pardon my reading a little bit from my notes. It's great to be here among such distinguished guests. To think that about 10 years ago I never thought of speaking about water and sanitation. It was just not my interest. I was focusing on economic development. It all started when a graduate school professor said, "Ella, come join us in Mozambique. I need your Portuguese skills." I said, "Well, that was blunt. Thank you very much. I'd love to give you my time." So I went. It was a graduate school seminar which culminated in a summer in Mozambique, working on a peri-urban strategy and working in the low-income areas. And that was basically the beginning of this long journey, or going to be a long journey through the water and sanitation sector. And it was a month pro bono work in Maputo back then. And I remember saying, "This is all you're gonna get. I don't wanna work in water and sanitation. I want to keep going, doing my work in private sector development and small medium enterprises." My professor, Jennifer Davis, just smiled at me, knowing I would change my mind, and she was right. Here I am almost a decade later, deeply entrenched in the sector, in water and poop, excuse my language, and more passionate than I've ever been. How can one not be? How can you not be? You've heard the figures, 2.5 billion, almost 1 billion without access to improved water sources. That's reason enough to be moved. That's reason why I can't leave the sector. The World Bank Group is the largest multilateral financier in water supply and sanitation, water resource management, drainage, and other water-related sectors. We also provide advisory and technical assistance to client governments, such as Uganda. We have a portfolio of about $7.5 billion. This was in 2011, 2012. That's a lot of money, but that's not enough. As we heard already, the government of Uganda thinks there's not enough money. The World Bank thinks as well that's not enough money. It sounds like a lot. But the challenge is so much that we cannot do it alone. The private sector has a role to play. You have a role to play. So for the remaining minutes that I have, which is probably 3, I will briefly highlight 3 key smart investments that I see in the water sector. First is blending public and private financing. Is there a way to blend public and private financing instead of providing 100% subsidies on infrastructure investment? Can the public sector and donors work together to leverage private and community level financing? To reach the scale that we need, we are always looking for ways of leveraging every dollar of that contribution. Leverage the key. So for example, in Kenya, we're working with a KREP Bank, EU Water Facility, and other donors to provide financing to community-based water providers. So far, we've funded 23 projects. We expect that by next year, 2013, the $3 million in infrastructure subsidies will leverage about $6 million from private resources. That's still not a lot. We're only talking 20-something projects going to 50. So the challenge is still there. The second point I want to talk about is the need to leverage private sector technical and management know-how. We heard a little bit about appropriate technology, so I won't get into that. Local private entrepreneurs actually in developing countries have increasingly played a role in delivering water and sanitation services. Whether managing something that's built by the government already, or sinking their own money, $10,000, $20,000, own savings, personal loans, to build their own water supply system to bring water to households around them. In Uganda, actually, the water supply system in around 80 towns are managed by the private sector. Believe it or not, that's one of the larger scale examples in the entire world of private sector actually being involved in the town water supply subsector. And in Mozambique, where I was recently working and where I've been living, I had the privilege of working and continuing to work with such brave and talented and very committed entrepreneurs. Just yesterday morning, I got an email from Senor Shiponde, and he lives about 400 kilometers up north of the capital of Maputo. He manages the water system, and he just wanted to share his 3 months worth of financial and operational data for the water supply system he runs. He's a very savvy entrepreneur. He's managed to increase coverage 300% and improve services through better standpipe management. But the needs are greater, and so he wanted our analytical and advisory support to help him expand his business. He might need also additional financing to expand, and the government might not have enough for him. So just a little food for thought. This is not an official World Bank idea necessarily. This is just from my experience working and living and working with these entrepreneurs. One thing that has become more evident over the past few years is the need to devise a way for global citizens to contribute to the water and sanitation crisis, either by directly funding entrepreneurs or indirectly through local nonprofits or foundations. So one idea is to, not sure, has anyone heard of Kiva? So with a click of a button, you can actually fund a water and sanitation entrepreneur, because a lot of the government donor funding are actually bigger amounts, and we're just talking a few $100s to $10,000 that an entrepreneur needs to expand his water system. However, funding, technical, and management capacity are not effective unless we're also able to invest in the third thing I'm going to talk about. And this third point is probably the least appealing, the least sexy of all. It's just monitoring and accountability. But I think it's the hardest to get right. How many of you have actually donated money to a cause in the last few years? Wow, most people. So have you actually seen your investment and what it has been doing? Have you actually seen what impact it has? So as the largest financier in the sector, we're also trying to improve our record, and it's not that easy. Focusing on monitoring and improving accountability is one impactful way to ensure sustainability in the future. So in 2011, the government of Liberia, with support from UNICEF, Water and Sanitation Program, Water for People, and a few other organizations, were able to map its over 10,000 previously unknown water points within 6 months. That's a feat. Ron was just talking about 10,000 polio cases and probably the limitation of being able to monitor that. Well, now we have the technology. They did this in Liberia by sending 150 data collectors with smartphones, very simple smartphones, less than $100 each, 50, 60, equipped with a mobile technology called Flow, originally developed by Water for People. In this case, monitoring helped support the government of Liberia in its accountability to its citizens. With technology, social media, and other advances in recent years, it should be easier to actually do more monitoring. We're constantly looking for ways to use mobile technology to obtain consumer feedback. The consumers must have a voice, and their voices must be heard. All of you in this room have a part to play. Even the small donations of your time or money, discussions, it can go a long way. I remember fundraising about almost 10 years ago with Professor Davis, and then the then director of Water Aid Mozambique, Ned Breslin, who's now with Water for People, to pay for our local expenses for our pro bono work in Mozambique. My team and I submitted funding proposals, asked relatives, friends. Professor Davis even ran a marathon to get money. It was this experience that inspired me to work in the water and sanitation sector. And perhaps more powerful of all, it's the experience of seeing and working and knowing women and children around the world who suffer the most without access to safe water and sanitation. It's what keeps me up all night. It's what gets me up in the morning, even in spite of the morning sickness that I feel. So thanks so much for listening, and I'll take questions later.